Let's talk about XML and mission files. The XML grammar in the plugin was defined by the programmer. In order not to be too techy, let's agree that each element should start with the symbols lower than and finish with greater than. Each element needs a closing element. For example, flight plan needs a closing flight plan. We close an element with the slash symbol. If it is a one-liner element, for example, start leg message, then on the same line we also close the element with a slash. It doesn't have any childs. If it has one or more child elements, like for example the flight leg element, then we create a closing element and the slash is moved to the closing element. Basically, this is the fundamental grammar of XML. There are elements and each element needs a closing element. Now an element can have attributes. Attributes describe the element itself. It doesn't have to have one. For example, a flight leg is just a container of other elements. Flight leg, for example, has its own attributes. The attribute's name describes the name of the flight leg. There is also the attribute next leg, which basically once you finish the flight leg, the mission will continue to a flight leg with that name. We can envision the mission file as a folder tree. Each folder is an element and it might have sub-elements. To understand what the element means and how we can configure them, we should check the designer guide. So let us move to the designer guide. The designer guide holds all the information needed to create a mission. It holds important information and topics regarding breaking changes, tips, and the elements that construct the mission file. Let's take a look at few topics. For example, changes since version 2.2.4 and 6. These are guidelines how to modify your old mission file to be compatible with the latest one. Tips and for the designer, highly recommend to read this. I try to add other tips every version, especially the organize your flight leg, or for example how to test specific leg. Although the designer guide is useful, sometimes it is simpler to just open other mission files, go over them and figure out their meaning. Due to the fact that the mission XML grammar is simple and use common words, you can then try to grasp what are the role of the element and their attributes. We can just copy parts of the elements that we want and modify them and make the best of it for our mission file. In this part, I would like to speak about Mission X fundamental XML elements and their role. So what are the main elements in a mission file and how we use them to build a mission? mission file has mandatory, complementary, and optional elements. Most of the work is done in the mandatory elements. For example, flight leg, the objective of the flight, triggers that we probably use to handle events. These are the main elements. Also the tasks. Each objective has tasks. Complementary elements, for example, data refs. Data refs are parameters that Xplain provide us. It can be messages. Maybe we want to send predefined messages. Mission information, describing the mission itself or the briefer. Object templates to display 3D objects, and so on. By using these main elements, the mandatory and complementary, we can basically build and write simple missions without complicating with code or scripts, and yet providing engaging scenarios. Now let's take a look at a mission file and how it is constructed. Let's start with mission info. The mission information basically provides the mission image file. You can add who wrote this mission, plain description, basically information regarding the mission itself. You will see it in the briefer. Speaking about the briefer, we also have the briefer element. The briefer holds the description of the mission. You also see it on the briefer screen. You also define the starting location and the starting flight leg. Moving down the chain, again, the order is not important, but I try to keep the order for myself. It is easier to handle the mission. Now, a flight plan element is just container. Okay, the flight plan is a container for other elements. I prefer that each flight plan element will have only one flight leg and its complementary elements. For example, the first leg here is from FBMN to FB07. So my flight plan has one flight leg. The flight leg defines which objective it needs to accomplish. There is a short description for the briefer itself. I also define the map. You can add display objects and other elements. Now, if we are going to use the objective GW1, then the element objective will be inside the same flight plan. Inside the objective, we define the task, what needs to be done. Again, the objective is a high-level container. The task is what needs to be done. What do we need to accomplish? Now, in Mission X, to accomplish something, we need to base it on a trigger. We can base it on a script, and there are other options that you can base it upon. You need also to have at least one mandatory task. If there won't be any mandatory task in your objectives and in your flight leg, then automatically it will be flagged as successful. So at least one of them needs to be mandatory. The objective and triggers hold the actual tasks and outcome of them, while the messages elements hold predefined dialogues that you want to send to the simmer. These are, in a nutshell, the building blocks of any mission file.